Hey everyone, my name is Rick Gualtieri and this is another Tales of the Midlist author. I recently had asked in my Facebook group, Team Twat Waffle by the way, feel free to join us. There's plenty of authors in there and I asked what were some topics that people wanted to see me talk about. I got a ton of them and plenty I think to keep me going for the next several weeks here. Today I want to talk about fan mail and really just kind of like fan interactions. Before we get to that, though, I'm just going to let you know that there probably will be a few topics I'm going to revisit in some future videos, kind of updating them for 2018. It's not a case of forgetting what I've recorded before. It's more of a case of the business changes, and as the business changes, I want to update things I've said. So, for example, I did a Kindle Unlimited one a while back. I'm going to do an updated one just because the situation has kind of changed with Kindle Unlimited. So, the advice of should you go in it or should you not? Just to make sure that these stay up to date and current, because a marketing video, not to say my marketing advice was bad, but a marketing video from like 2 years ago might not be as relevant today. So, just in case it looks like and you're like, hey, you already covered that topic. It's more just to keep us updated. So anyway, one of the things this actually stemmed from somebody asking, well, tell us about your wackiest fan mail. And I was like, well, honestly, considering what I write, I haven't really gotten a lot of wacky fan mails. Most of my email has been relatively sedate. Some of it's been funny, some of it's been like very poignant, which is awesome. A few of them have been angry. Welcome to life. That happens. So I wanted to talk about well, how should you deal with these? Now, I'll preface this advice by saying you have to find what works for you and what's comfortable for you. This is what's comfortable for me, and I'll explain why it's comfortable for me. But if it's not in your comfort zone, you need to step back and find what is, because this series is really not about my way of doing things. It's about ways of doing things and the philosophy behind why I might do it. And you need to find your own philosophy about doing things your way as well. So, and I'm talking about, when I talk about customer interactions here, I'm not talking about reviews. A review on Amazon or or Goodreads or so, that's typically considered something that unless they are reaching out and asking you a question, you're probably not. It's probably best to just step away and not deal with. So this is not dealing with an angry 1-star review. This is actually dealing with somebody who has reached out to you purposefully to contact you. So what are the various ways people can reach out? Well, if we want to go completely creeptastic, maybe somebody found your phone number, dug it up, and is using that, in which case maybe consider keeping an eye on them in case you want to file a restraining order. Stepping away from that, a lot of authors put contact. The idea behind being an author and doing social media and stuff is typically you want a way out there for people to contact you, whether it's through your website, whether it's through Facebook, whether it's through Twitter, what have you. So ways for people to reach out to you: email or a website contact form. That's probably the most common. PM, personal message, or DM, direct message, whatever you want to call it. And this would typically be through social media. It could be through your fan page, or it could be through your personal page on Facebook, and it's probably through your account on Twitter. And I'm sure there's ways to reach out to you, via the others, maybe Instagram or so. I'm working on those a bit, trying to up my presence on Instagram a bit, but that's one. It could also be old school. Maybe somebody actually writes to if you have a P.O. box and you put it out there, somebody might actually write you a actual fan letter, in which case I would say frame that shit, put it up in your wall, because that's worth its weight in gold, especially in this day and age of instantaneous gratification and everything electronic. So my way of dealing with fan interactions is that I try to answer everyone. So and sometimes it's not always easy. Sometimes things screw up. Somebody will send me a PM and Facebook will hide it, and I won't see it for like 6 months or so. If so, I try to apologize to people for that. But I try to answer everything that is not spam. At this point, I'm not going to go over what spam is. Hopefully, you know. And I would say I would include in spam any cold call solicitations trying to sell you something. Especially if you didn't reach out to them first. And this could be anything from like being added to an email list of, hey, send to like, to Book Lantern, where we can advertise your book. It's like, how the hell did you find me? Or it could be, one common thing that's out there is, people trying to sell their services. They'll reach out to you and be like, hey, I read your book and it was pretty good, but there were a lot of typos. Hey, look at me, I'm an editor and I can help you do, like, get this back into shape. Honestly, now I have occasionally responded to those if it is painfully obvious the person has really read my book, and you can usually tell if somebody does it. If they're not there, they would actually give you like real examples of things they found, as opposed to like, and real examples from all over the book, not just stuff you're going to see in the look inside. But outside of that, most of those are kind of scummy. I would just ignore it. I'm talking about real, hey, I read your book and I love it and hate it, or love it you and hate you type fan mail. So my number one thing, aside from answering it, is to be polite. To be polite and friendly. I want people to know. I want people to know me. Me, Rick Gualtieri, not just like, I try to put on online a persona of, sometimes I'd be like, sometimes being like, edgy. I can be a bit of an asshole at times. The real me, though, I don't want to say I'm a nice guy, because I'm sure somebody will write and be like, no, you actually are an asshole. But, I try to, like, treat people the way I would want to be treated myself. So I write them back and like, hey, so-and-so, I'm really glad you wrote me. And then get into the meat of what I'm answering and make it so that they know it's me that's answering and not just some form email. I'll tell you right now, I understand people get busy. I've heard this thing before. It's like, well, people keep asking me what's the order of my books, and how dare they bother me with that? They could just go to my website. I would say, unless you're J.K. Rowling and or selling like thousands upon thousands of copies a day, stop being a conceited douchebag and like help the people who are asking you for help. Just my 2 cents. It takes a couple of seconds for me to copy and paste it and then put it in there and just be like, write something friendly and personal to people. So be polite. Even if people hate you, I'll be perfectly honest, I try to be polite with them, because I think that's just a way of doing it. Like, and some other authors have like, they're like, well, hey, if somebody's nasty to me, I'm going to be nasty to them. That is your prerogative. Truth of the matter is, I think there's only a couple authors out there who can like do that. My friend Robert Bevan, he's pretty much a master. In fact, I think he's made that part of his brand of when somebody gives him something snarky, he just hits them back like 10 times harder, and usually it's funny as hell. I will just offer this advice. For every one Jedi Master, there are probably 1,000 Padawans who are going to get it wrong. So before you go that route, maybe think twice. Also, my personal feeling is that I think almost anything negative can be turned into a positive. Somebody writes you and says, hey, I have a problem with what your character did, blah, 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 whatever. Write them back and just be like, okay, well, I really appreciate you writing me. Thank you for picking up my books, and maybe explain it and say, hey, here's the reason my character did that. Maybe I disagree with your logic or your reasoning, but here's my reasoning. I have been able to turn it around a couple times where people are like, wow, you got back to me and you didn't call me an asshole. Well, gee, you're a reasonable person. Let's actually talk. There's nothing there is actually no win quite like turning something around and like I said, making that negative into a positive. And sometimes you can't salvage. Let's be honest. Somebody just calls to tell you that you suck, your books are offensive, you're offensive, whatever. They just want to get it off their chest. In which case, I would still be polite, because hey, they still bought my stuff, so why shouldn't I be? And hey, if they want to hate me afterwards, that's their prerogative. But I don't like to leave off on a negative with me, unless it's maybe a long email chain where it's just clear that it's getting a little out there. I usually do like to be constructive. as a mid-list author who's moved a decent amount of books, I do get a lot of requests for, like, from other authors for various things. Sometimes it's, hey, will you read my stuff? Sometimes will you blurb it? Sometimes it's just advice. I try really hard not to blow people off. I do realize it's hard to, like, you can't mentor everybody. But I like to at least give, like, people, like, at least whatever help I can in a little bit of an email. So I try to be constructive, which comes down to that being polite. And the other thing is, I like to have fun. Most of the people who are reading my stuff, they're reading probably, like, my Build a Vampire stuff, so, which is humorous. So they're going to write me and be like, hey, Author Monkey, what's up? And I'm going to be like, yo, try to be fun, have some fun with them as well. That's also part of, like, that's part of who I am. It's part of my brand, which fortunately is also part of who I am. But that's the other thing. I like to have fun with that. Because the thing is, I enjoy interacting with people online because sometimes you meet some really awesome people that way. It's amazing. Like, just taking a little bit of time to make something personal can really just turn into a real online friendship. So that's something else to keep in mind. And quite frankly, I don't know about you, but I'm all for more friends. I would say, I mentioned don't be negative. Again, do what's comfortable for you, but regardless of what you do, don't be a freaking creep. Don't like, and I think the female authors of the world out there have to deal with that more than me. But as a male author, like, when a female fan writes to me, that's the other thing is, I'm not going to be a creep. I'm not going to be a weirdo or so. Now, truthfully, there's no real reason for me to be, because I write mostly horror and urban fantasy. I think the most I've asked somebody is somebody wrote and said, hey, I had a Bigfoot sighting. And I was like, dude, tell me about it. Which hopefully is not creepy, but, well, hopefully the story that came back was creepy, but in a good way. But my thing is, don't be a creep. And I mentioned, this is something that, like, came up in the past, is that with pen names, especially in, like, in like genres like romance and stuff, it's pretty common to have pen names that gender swap. There's nothing wrong with it. I personally have Caravance out there, which, if you haven't read The Necromancer's Wife, it's one of my favorites. Go and grab it. Cheap plug. So, but there's been cases out there where, like, where there's been some catfishing going on, where people, like, like, hey, hey, I'm so and so, and I write this, and hey, thanks for writing, and I think you're my book girlfriend now, and, like, it's like, tell me your, like, most deepest, darkest secrets. I gotta be honest, that just creeps me the fuck out. Some people might be into that, but honestly, I think that's a line I personally wouldn't want to cross, and my advice would be that's probably a line you don't want to cross. I would keep it friendly, friendly, fun, and light, stuff like that. But there are certain lines that I really don't like to cross. And I mean, one thing I would also say is always thank people, especially the people who are super cool. I mean, there's people who have written me and be like, dude, I was listening to your book, and, like, I spewed coffee out of my nose, and that's hilarious to read. But then there's people, like, I've gotten, like, letters from, like, Afghanistan, like a soldier saying, hey, I read your stuff, and it's the only thing that kept me sane out here. And it's like, holy crap, I like that's like an honor beyond I can even express in words. I would say, if somebody's writing praise, like, now here's the thing, personal praise like that, like I just mentioned with, like, a soldier, so that's something I would keep to myself. That's just my thing. If it is along the lines of, hey, this is a great book or so, a lot of authors aren't afraid to ask for a review or ask, hey, would you mind if I quoted you somewhere? I would say in certain cases, don't be afraid to ask that. A lot of people would be like, hell yeah, if I loved your books, feel free to, like, use my quote or so. I don't think you need to be afraid of doing that. I would just say use good taste. There are certain things I would not ask about, especially, like, the really deeply personal stuff. But like something along the lines of, dude, this is funny as fuck. Hell yeah, I'd ask if I could share that. On the negative side, I would say every so often you're going to have an interaction that is going to go bad, or it's going to start off bad. And again, I think the female authors are going to deal with this more than me. I can count, like, the number of total creep, or, like, or just, like, troll, like, PMs I've gotten, like, if not on one hand, I mean, it's been like over 5 years, at least 2 hands. Whereas I know some female author friends of mine. They get it on like a weekly, if not daily basis. I would say, don't be afraid to cut somebody off if things are crossing the line, and don't be afraid to block people if that is the thing. The main thing is you have to be comfortable. Never forget that. This is your author persona. This is your brand building. Got a gnat in front of me here. But this is what I do. It doesn't have to be what you do. Like I said, I just wanted to explain the philosophy behind it. You have to find that mix for you where you are comfortable. Because I think if you're comfortable and you're genuine, people can tell that, as opposed to if you're forcing it or if you're just rubber stamping something. Don't underestimate cat in the background. But at the same time, like I said, be comfortable and be safe online. That really is my advice. As far as wacky fan mail, as I said, I really haven't gotten too much. That's completely out there, which is weird considering the stuff I write. You would think I would get a lot more of those, but as I said, most of the stuff I get is actually relatively sedate, which is cool. On my Facebook group, that's a different story. I think people are purposely on there trying to get others to like blow their coffee out of their nose and stuff, which is not so cool. All right, so I will be back soon with more. This was kind of a short one. My name is Rick Gualtieri. This is Tales of a Midlist Author, and I hope to talk to you again really soon.